Hello and welcome. Today I'm reading the Cameo 31. This was the cameo that was linked in the lesson 109, I Rest in God. So I thought, as a continuation of that, why not read this to get a perspective of what that lesson was about and how it is correlated. So, Cameo 31 is the priestess. Lesson 109 in the workbook, I Rest in God, contains a clear reference to an apparent past life vision Helen had in the summer of 1965, following her agreement to join Bill in another way and preceding the dictation of the course, which would commence some months later. The vision was of Helen as a priestess in the distant past, and it turned out to be remarkably prescient for her future. The vision echoed in lesson 109 was actually the third inner vision she had that summer that depicted her as an ancient priestess. In her very first inner vision, guessing that is her age when she was 29, or not. Maybe we'll find out. I have no idea. I'm going to find out. She saw some sort of priestess who was heavily draped and kneeling with bowed head, heavy chains twisted around her wrists and ankles. This vision would recur almost daily, and as it did, the chains began to drop away and she began to raise her head. Very slowly, she finally stood up with only a short, unconnected length of chain still tied to her left wrist. The priestess then raised her eyes to look at Helen, and Helen, after at first looking away in fear, eventually returned her gaze only to discover that the eyes of the priestess was full of innocence and saw absolutely nothing in Helen that warranted condemnation. Then Helen says, I was suddenly swept away by a sense of joy so intense I could hardly breathe. Aloud I asked, does this mean I can have my function back? The answer the answer silent but perfectly clear was, of course. I would not have believed it was possible to experience such happiness as that answer called forth in me, and for a little while I kept repeating, how wonderful, oh how wonderful. This image of the priestess seems to be a vivid symbol for what Jesus would soon call the soul, a divine element in our nature that retains its heavenly purity yet feels shackled by our commitment to separation. Once the course dictation began, Jesus used a similar image in relation to 31. Bill had made a Freudian slip, and Jesus said this slip was an expression of a soul gaining enough strength to request freedom from prison. It will ultimately demand it. So here we have the basic concept applied to both Helen and Bill, which naturally raises the question of whether this concept is true for us as well. Is there, in other words, a pure soul in each of us that has been imprisoned, yet it is now rising to freedom? The second priestess vision, 30 to 31, and I'm really guessing that this is the age. So 29 she has one, and then 30 to 31, that's her age when she has another vision. Could not have been more opposite. In this one, Helen was the high priestess of an ancient society, only now she was an evil priestess. Her religion was power and enslavement. In this life, Bill was the leader of a slave revolt who then managed to steal the large center ruby from the priestess's crown. It was not an ordinary ruby. It gave its wearer magical powers. He had, however, been caught, and Helen was about to execute him by thrusting a spear between his eyes. However, at the last second, she drew down the spear, signifying that Bill would live and she would die. The final scene was of her walking into exile in the scorching desert where death awaited her, furious with herself for dying for a rebellious slave who was nothing but a common thief. Then comes the third priestess vision, 31 to 32. So those are the ages. The one that is echoed in lesson 109. The next scene in order of appearance seemed to be so ancient that it appeared as if it was taking place at the very beginning of time. I was a priestess again, but this time of a very different kind. This priestess was in fact much like the one with the innocent eyes I had watched emerging from heavy chains into freedom. She was hidden from the world in a small white marble temple set in a broad and very green valley. I was not sure that her body was entirely solid. Actually, what was seen was little more than an outline of a small, slender woman, dressed in white, who never came further into the world than the doorway of the little room which contained a plain wooden altar. A small flame burned on it, sending up a steady column of white smoke. The priestess stayed close to the altar, sitting on a low wooden stool and praying with closed eyes for those who came to her for help. Sometimes I saw only the valley outside the temple. At times there seemed to be no one there, but at times there was a huge column of people marching together very joyously. The columns seemed to extend endlessly in both directions, and I could somehow feel the deep sense of freedom and unity each individual was experiencing as he marched ahead to certain victory. I was not sure that the exact role of the priestess was in helping them all, but I was somehow convinced that her prayers made a vital contribution. I was also sure that people came to her for help from all over, some in fact from very far away. They did not, however, speak to her directly. They knelt on the ledge that ran around a low wall which separated the inner and outer parts of the temple and stated their needs to a man who seemed to be serving as a sort of intermediary between the priestess and the world. He remained in a large enclosed space that separated the priestess from those who came for help. The man conveyed their needs to her. I did not see the man's face for some time, and it took me even longer to recognize him as Bill. He played a crucial role in enabling the priestess to fulfill her function. When people told him what they needed, he went to the door of her room and merely told her that there had been a request for help. He said only that a brother had come for healing, and then he asked for help on behalf of the brother. The priestess never asked for anyone's name nor for the details of his request. She prayed for everyone in the same way, sitting very quietly beside the flame on the altar. It never occurred to her that help would not be granted. She never really left God's side, and she remained peacefully certain of his presence there in the room with her. I was sure she was myself, and yet I was not sure. What was certain was that I watched her with great love. This image of Helen as a priestess, though it came from visions that preceded the course, was so significant that it cropped up repeatedly once the course dictation began. For instance, near the end of what is now chapter 1, we find in the notes these comments from Helen which clarify the request Bill made to the priestess and the prayer process she then went through. I just have to say some of these are the notes of Robert, who actually uh, wrote all these cameos. He found all these things that the cameo is nothing but the lessons that were given to Helen, things that are not included in the blue book. So the purple book has all of those things. So if you see something, that means the author is saying something. Priestess, a brother has knelt at your shrine. Heal him through me. I have an idea that the shrine merely referred to the altar within which the priestess served. I imagine that the communication was direct and the brother always nameless. I think the priestess responded automatically by praying directly to God, standing with upraised arms to draw down a blessing on her brother who knelt outside. Her response was completely automatic and impersonal. Impersonal means that her response was not based on anything special or unique about the recipient. She never even thought of checking the outcome because there was no doubt. I imagine there is still no doubt really, except that the priestess can no longer ask alone. It was originally sister, not priestess. In addition to this, there are a few places in Helen's early notes where Jesus refers to the priestess. One describes her function. The role of priestess was once to experience revelations and work miracles. The purpose was to bring those not yet available for direct revelations into proper focus for them. Heightened perception was always the essential priestess attribute. The priestess, in other words, was meant to have experiences of oneness with God, that is revelations, which would leave in her mind a state of heightened perception. She would then extend the heightened perception to others in the form of miracles, and this would ready them for what had so far been out of their reach, their own experiences of oneness with God. Another reference to the priestess in what is now chapter 4 praises Helen for being both wise and devoted in claiming your scribal functions and working solely. This seems to refer to Helen receiving guidance about a woman's unconscious dynamics in relation to her husband. Jesus implies that by receiving this message, Helen was being a devoted priestess. He then later says, I need devoted teachers as much as I need devoted priestesses. They heal the mind, and there is always my own, and that is always my own aim. So, and we'll go from there. We'll connect that way. This theme of the priestess therefore runs through both Helen's early visions and her early dictation. In essence, it signifies a role, the role of mediator between the spiritual dimension and the world. The priestess is in direct contact with the spiritual dimension. She never really left God's side. She is able to experience revelations, and because of her contact with that dimension, its blessings can flow through her to others. Her prayers can make a vital contribution to those who seek her help. Her eyes can convey to them the innocence they didn't realize was within. Her messages can heal the mind. Her miracles can open the door to revelation. According to her visions, this is a role that Helen had once completely embodied, yet that was in the distant past. This is clear in the first vision, in which the priestess was kneeling near a fire that appeared to be associated with an ancient religious rite. It is especially clear in the third vision, which seemed to depict a scene so ancient that it appeared as if it was taking place at the very beginning of time. Since the primeval time, Since the primeval time, she had clearly fallen away from this high function. We see this most starkly in the second vision, which still in ancient times, Helen was a priestess who used her paranormal powers not to heal and bless, but to dominate and enslave. This brings us to her life as Helen, where for her first 56 years, her identity as the ancient priestess was entirely submerged. This identity, though, was not merely a past role, it remained a living presence within her. It was, in a sense, her sole identity, which, though currently bound and shackled, was waiting for the opportunity to rise up and resume its ancient function. And so when Bill cleared, there must be another way. And so when Bill declared there must be another way and Helen agreed to join him in it, the chains fell. And so when Bill declared there must be another way and Helen agreed to join him in it, the chains began to fall away and the priestess began to stir to life. The form her ministry would take in this lifetime would be very different than in the past, of course. Rather than conducting religious rites or sending out prayers from inside a marble temple, Helen would be a conduit for the blessings of the spiritual dimension through the messages she took down. This was how she would pass on to others the heightened perception that she had the gift of accessing within herself. In Helen's function as scribe of A Course in Miracles, therefore, the priestess emerged from the past to resume her ancient role. In fact, the specific image of the priestess in the temple is almost uncannily mirrored in Helen's eventual role as scribe of the Course. Just as the priestess communed with God and then sent out the blessings from that in the form of prayer, so Helen communed with Jesus and sent out the blessings from that in the form of spiritual teachings. Just as Bill played a crucial role in enabling the priestess fulfill her functions, so he did the same with Helen. Only now, instead of relaying messages from the people, Bill relayed messages to the people from Helen through his typewriter. In both cases, though, his support was what completed the circuit, allowing the solitary figure to reach the people for whom her blessings were intended. And just as the priestess's prayers attracted a huge column of people marching together very joyously, so Helen's messages have touched countless lives through A Course in Miracles and the works inspired and influenced by it. Now we can grasp the true significance of what happened at the end of her first vision, where she asked, "Does this mean I can have my function back?" And then heard the silent but perfectly clear answer, "Of course, this is exactly what happened." The ancient priestess did get her function back and millions have been blessed thereby. Yet how could any of that have been known when Helen first saw her vision of the priestess in the temple months before she heard the words, "This is A Course in Miracles, please take notes"? How could she know that she was seeing a vision not only of her past but also of her future? Given the significance of the image of the priestess, it's not surprising that we find echoes of it in the Course. The first is the text section titled "The Reflection of Holiness." This section represents an image of a temple where holiness waits quietly for the return of them that love it. It then says that you can become a spotless mirror in which the holiness of your Creator shines forth from you to all around you. And when you do this, it says others will come to you for the healing of their problems through the image of holiness that shines in your mind. They bring their different problems to its healing light, but all their problems are met only with healing there. The responses of holiness to any form of error is always the same. Its one response is healing without any regard for what is brought to it. We can readily see here echoes of the holy priestess in her temple, waiting for those who will come to it, serving as a pure conduit for the light of God, and responding to everyone's problems with the exact same gift of healing without regard for any of the individual details. As we mentioned at the beginning of this cameo, through the clearest reference to Helen's priestess vision is found in Workbook Lesson 109, I rest in God. In rest, you rest within the peace of God today and will call upon your brothers from your rest to draw them to their rest along with you. You will be faithful to your trust today. forgetting no one, bringing everyone into the boundless circle of your peace. The holy sanctuary where you rest. Once open the temple doors and let them come from far across the world and near as well. Your distant brothers and your closest friends with them all enter here and rest with you. You rest today within the peace of God, quiet and unafraid. Each brother comes to take his rest and offer it to you. We rest together here. For thus our rest is made complete, and what we give today we have received already. The parallels with Helen's vision are unmistakable. We have here a temple occupied by someone who is sunk deep in communion with God, and to this temple comes a multitude of others, some from very far away, to partake in the spiritual blessings that radiate from this person. The difference, of course, is that here the pattern is applied to us. The above passage is part of this lesson's meditation instructions. Given that it clearly alludes to the vision of the priestess, it implies that when we meditate, we should see ourselves as serving the same role that the priestess did. We typically think of meditation as a solitary activity, but the idea here is that just as a priestess prayed to send out healing to the huge column that came to her temple, so when we meditate, we should we should see ourselves as serving the same role that the priestess did. We typically think of meditation as a solitary activity. But the idea here is that just as the priestess prayed to send out healing to the huge column that came to her temple, so when we meditate, we should consciously invite everyone into our temple to draw them into the boundless circle of our peace. Much the same could be said of the earlier passage from the Reflection of Holiness. There we are also asked to be what the priestess was, a channel of healing, who is brought a variety of different problems by different people, but who offers to all of them the exact same response, healing. The end of the story, therefore, is not that Helen repeated her ancient role as a priestess and we are the beneficiaries of that, as uplifting as that is. The end of the story is that we, as Helen's spiritual heirs, are called to repeat the role of the priestess ourselves. We are meant to have our own temple and cultivate there our own connection with it. And then, like Helen, we are meant to pass on the priceless blessings of that connection to others. Perhaps then we should see the following passage about extending God's peace, which is clearly reminiscent of the priestess as describing our own life purpose. And you will carry its message of love and safety and freedom to everyone who draws nigh unto your temple, where healing waits for him. And there are other references.